We find ourselves in the year 1066. In England, trouble has started brewing and it seems that war is inevitable. Edward the Confessor, the then King of England, dies with no heirs, and the same day Harold Godwinson is crowned king. Opposing him stands William, the Duke of Normandy, who claims that Edward assigned him as his successor a few years prior. For those wondering, Normandy is here. In the other side of the continent, Harold Hardrada also claims the throne of England, basing his claim on an agreement made with the previous English king. Soon, William would foster an army and prepare for the invasion of England. Godwinson would do the same and wait for William in the southern coasts of Britain. Unfortunately for Harold, Hardrada would land in the north of the country, near the old city of York, which he would soon conquer. Godwinson would take his army and march to the other side of the Isle at an astonishing pace to confront Hardrada. The two kings met at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. With the Norsemen being caught off guard, Godwinson's forces managed to force a breakthrough in the lines, managing to slay Hardrada and winning the battle. Victory was short-lived, however, as just 3 days later, news reached Harold that William landed at Pevensey Bay. Harold would be forced to take his exhausted army across the country once more. There, the battle that took place, the Battle of Hastings, would decide the future of English and by extension world history. The Saxons had the high ground as they were on top of a hill, and it seemed that the Normans were unable to score an easy victory. During the battle, William would fall from his horse to the ground. The Normans, thinking their king has just died, began to retreat. As a subsequent result, some of the Anglo-Saxons, thinking they've won, left their defensive position and began to chase them down. William, however, is revealed to still be alive, and after reorganizing his army, he ambushed the Saxons that were foolish enough to chase the retreating Normans down. In the end, Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king, would take an arrow to the eye, killing him instantly. William has emerged victorious, and over the next years he would consolidate his power over the country. The Norman conquest of England would see the start of a new period of history. English and French dynastic affairs would be tied with each other, as the Dukes of Normandy, originally subjects to the French king, were now in control of an independent kingdom, separate from France, which would only lead to one thing, and that thing is war. So, how would the world have looked had Harold Godwinson managed to defeat William and defend the English independence? We find ourselves in an alternate Battle of Hastings. William falls from his horse and the Normans mount a large retreat. The Anglo-Saxons, more cautious than in our timeline, don't take the bait and continue to hold their shield wall on top of the hill. Sooner or later, the Normans will exhaust themselves and the English will go on the offensive. During the chaos, William is killed by the mighty axe of the Saxons and the Normans lay defeated in the battlefield. Godwinson emerges as the sole ruler of England, having defeated both Norway and Normandy in a matter of 10 months. So, what's next? Well, Normandy suddenly finds herself without a duke. Soon, the kings of France will take advantage of the situation to annex the duchy back into France proper. Without the force of Normandy fueling the rivalry between France and England, we will likely see France unite much earlier than they did in our timeline. Well, unite isn't really the right word here, rather it's to centralize with relative ease. We have to remember that France back then was a mess worse than even the Holy Roman Empire of old. Well, maybe not that bad actually, but regardless, the central government didn't really assert influence over the counties, and most of them acted as basically independent states. I mean, Normandy literally conquered England without without even consolidating the French kings. In fact, France mostly found herself in this time period fighting a bunch of civil wars, most prominent of these being the conflicts with the Angevin Empire, which came to dominate Normandy, Aquitaine, and England, to name a few. Such conflicts, as well as the 100 Years' War, which came later, would come to exhaust France and prevent her from major progress. Since in this timeline the line of William is absent, France will have an easier time centralizing and would come to eclipse the HRE much sooner than they did in our timeline. Meanwhile, England obviously has also been significantly impacted by the defeat of the Normans. England finds herself ruled by Harold Godwinson. We don't really know a lot about how he'd rule the country, but many people argue that he'd be a great leader. I'm going to side with that narrative and assume so. Godwinson would move England into a bright and peaceful future. I doubt he would personally want to start more wars with the Scottish or the Welsh, as the nation just needs time to recover for now. English society has also been significantly impacted. In our timeline, the Normans brought the feudal system and their dialect of Norman French to England. Furthermore, they established a centralized legal system by compiling all laws and customs into the Domesday Book. All of these changes would not happen, and England continues as it had before the Norman conquests. Before we continue, if you enjoy the content so far, consider subscribing. I recently set up a schedule for my scenarios, so if you have any ideas and wish to see this channel continue, leave them in the comments below. Anyways, let's get back with the video. Now, we've reached a point where predicting further becomes difficult, so I will have to be a bit vaguer to continue this scenario. I am relatively certain about the predictions made up until now, but fact is, medieval age alternate history is much more random than otherwise, mainly because scenarios really depend on which person comes into power of which country, and stuff like that are really unpredictable. In England, somewhere around the 1100s, I expect wars to resume. I see England attempting to conquer Scotland and Wales, with their efforts eventually paying out. A few wars with Scotland later would see the border being pushed really far north, solidifying Anglo-Saxon dominance over Scotland. As for the Welsh states that face a similar fate, being greatly reduced in the north, I doubt the Saxons would be able to conquer either nation fully, or want to for that matter. Wales and especially Scotland are really mountainous, and conquering such land wouldn't really provide the English much. At the same time, the Celts conquered would likely be demoted to second-class citizens, with them assimilating over time, although this process would take centuries. Okay, so enough English talk, let's take a look at what's going on with the rest of Europe. In the West, France is now starting to flex their muscle and looking for ways to expand. Now, assuming nothing crazy happens, I can reasonably say that France would continue to gain influence in many states of the Holy Roman Empire. It's also fully possible that France tries to be voted as Holy Roman Emperor to solidify their influence. This is so early in history that Spain isn't even united and the Habsburgs don't even exist yet. There is practically nothing stopping France from reuniting the Charlemagne Empire if they play their cards right. Meanwhile, assuming France is focusing on consolidating the HRE, Iberia is relatively unchanged. Of course, the details of the Reconquista would be different, but at the end of the day, the Christian states would have liberated Iberia regardless. As for Eastern Europe, a crucial detail needs to be cleared. Does the Fourth Crusade still happen? If so, then Eastern Europe will follow a similar trajectory to our timeline. If not, then we have secured the continued existence of the Byzantine Empire, which would continue to thrive and defend itself from outside threats. However, if you ask me, if we don't rely on factors like the butterfly effect, I doubt the Fourth Crusade is fully avoidable, but its consequences can't really be predicted with certainty. However, the East isn't really what concerns us right now. Let's discuss a timeline where France does succeed in being crowned Holy Roman Emperor, and that could very well happen. France would likely want to position herself as the defender of the crumbling empire. I expect that by the end of the 13th century, the HRE would be almost fully centralized under the French monarchs. To further add to this, the Byzantine Empire would have collapsed and have been replaced by the weak Latin Empire, incapable of standing up to the Neo-Frankish Empire. French domination over Europe is secured, and there can't possibly be anyone to oppose that. Absolutely no one, which I am aware of. But let's be fair here, maybe none of this would happen. It's really difficult to say for sure, really. Regardless, at this point we've went too far into the scenario to continue further. I'm sorry if the scenario was a bit vaguer than the other ones, but that's kind of what happens when you remove what is possibly the most influential rivalry in world history. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.